If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
This is FunBelt Commissioner Keith Gill, and I listen to the FunBelt podcast.
This is the FunBelt podcast, part of the Believe Network.
Hosts Dusty Thibodeau of Warhawk Report, Jeremy Harper of Howl Razor, and Shane Metlin of the Daily News Record.
I think it's potentially a very good week for the Sun Belts.
But I'm just kind of going off on a random rant. It's just frustrating. It's for the first time in 2024, the gang is all back together. Jeremy was MIA, looking for reps in Montgomery. Shane was, I don't know, crying about Signetti leaving and JMU losing a bowl game, and then they lost a basketball game. I was here. I was used to taking the L's, so here I am once again, but with the full gang in tow. Shane, how's it going in the land of purple and gold after the departure of Signetti and basketball falling from the graces of the unranked?
I mean, you kind of thought it was coming eventually. I thought there was, maybe a chance that JMU would be the first team since 1976 to go undefeated for the entire season, but turns out that was not going to happen for the Dukes. I don't think that's going to be a huge downer around here, but we'll see how they respond this week against some decent teams coming to Harrisonburg.
Yeah, but you know what? Was it that? I think it was kind of a surprise to see that it was Southern Miss. I mean, if you weren't really paying attention, you'd see that Southern Miss lost to Georgia Southern, which had been 0 wins before this, or before beating somebody. I forget who they beat. And then they go down. They go down to James Madison, or James Madison comes to them and gets beat. But that was partly because they sort of activated one of their star players. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're getting more and more used to playing with Andre Curbelo, who's, one of the most talented guys in the conference and is one of those players who suddenly became eligible when the courts decided everybody was eligible. And as for Southern Miss in particular, they went from, hey, we think this guy's got a really good case to get a waiver, so we're kind of building our offense around him, to 3-4 weeks into the season, they haven't heard anything from the NCAA, and they're kind of like, okay, well, I guess we got to scrap that and try to play a different style. And then all of a sudden, he is eligible, and now he's played a few games, and I think we're starting to see what Southern Miss can actually be with, there's not really a lot of teams anywhere that have a backcourt the caliber of Crowley and Andre Curbelo. Like, that's just two really, really good guards to build your team around.
So you were probably watching that game I watched a little bit at the end. Low scoring affair. Was a little surprised to see that. Do you feel like Southern Miss is a kind of a contender? They're 2-1 now in the Sun Belt. So are a lot of people. Do you feel like they can make a run?
Yeah, I think they're going to be contenders, and there's a lot of good teams in the Sun Belt right now. I mean, solid. I mean, it's more balanced, I think, on the women's side.
Sure.
It seems like almost everybody's good. But, I think we're seeing now 4 or 5 men's teams and even some surprises. Okay. Georgia Southern, right before we start recording, I'm hanging on every shot, Georgia Southern versus Marshall.
Yeah.
Thinking somehow Georgia Southern's going to have a winning record in conference play tonight. Marshall ended up pulling that out at home. But, all of a sudden, were the Eagles sandbagging us, through non-conference, where they're just like, hey, we're going to make everybody think we're absolutely horrible, and then we'll actually be competitive once league play starts.
All the major sports are in action this week. BetOnline is your #1 destination for all your sports wagering info, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games this season. BetOnline is my preferred betting platform for Jeremy Harper of Hellraiser. So head to the website today to get into the action and see all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. If I'm not wrong, and I could be wrong about this, their new coach comes out of Alabama. Arkansas State's new head coach comes out of Alabama. They both sort of took the same scheduling approach, which was to schedule some pretty tough opponents for non-con. Now, if you talk to Georgia Southern, they say, yeah, we really scheduled tough, so we'd be ready for Sun Belt play. I don't know if that's it. They did look bad, even when Arkansas State sort of clobbered them, but I didn't think they looked like a 0-12 team. By the way, Marshall, the first 4-0 team in conference after winning against Georgia Southern. 1,000% winning percentage, 9-8 overall. Marshall right now, the team to beat. Troy Trojans 3-0, the other undefeated team in conference. Yeah, this looks like it's shaping up, guys, to be a pretty competitive season, except for UL Monroe and the Monarchs, who haven't had a win yet.
In Texas State.
Wait, I'm looking at this right now. Is Texas State still? Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. The Boobcats, boobcatting. Arkansas State gets them tomorrow, so I'll get a better look at them. Dusty, what is going on with your Warhawks? Oh, my God. They're losing me money on betonline.com. Help me out.
I hope you're betting the over-under point total and not the line or the money line for
I'm
the
betting
Warhawks.
The line.
They've been sending a lot of games into the over.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I mean, the shots just aren't falling. Too many fouls on the defensive side, so then you're going further and further into the bench. It's just not. It's not good basketball right now. There's no other way to put it. Something's got to give. Whether somehow the voodoo on the bayou that the shots maybe start going in the basket or whatever, but something's got to give for this team to break into the win column, because it's been a while since they've tasted victory. They slid in non-conference to close out the non-conference slate, and it's just continued through conference.
Speaking of 0-3, Shane, should we be surprised that Old Dominion is within the ranks of the beatings, the non-winners?
Maybe a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I think they're still trying to figure some things out with, shake up in their coaching staff. They have no size. That doesn't help. I think, yeah, they really have nothing in the paint. But a little surprised they haven't pulled out a single win, but it's early, and Jamie's got to go down there again in a couple weeks, so they were relatively competitive for a while in that first non-conference game against them. I think they're going to pull out some wins. I think they're probably going to surprise some good teams, but it's a rough season for ODU. They've got a great recruiting class coming if they can keep that together, so we'll see what happens there.
It's also been rough for any team that's not playing at home. Dusty, are you surprised that the Bobcats are 0-3? Historically, both ODU and the Bobcats fielding great basketball teams. Doesn't look like so far this year.
Not really, because this is really TJ's first year of his guys, his players, and we're seeing that this is not the same as being the assistant coach when you kind of have the final say now as the head coach. Mm-hmm. I think they've missed on some guys, and I think that they're just continuing to struggle. Maybe it turns around as they kind of get their feet under them a little bit more in conference play, but I don't see them really righting the ship and rising to the top of the standings.
Well, let's stick with you, Dusty. our good friend Scott Cross leading Troy Trojans to a 3-0 start. Just like a lot of Sunbelt teams in the offseason, or not in the offseason, the OOC, the out-of-conference season, Troy didn't look especially great, but they're 3-0. What do you think Troy's doing right, or have you seen enough of Troy to understand it?
I think the big thing, they use those non-conference games to really find their identity and find themselves. The win-losses didn't really matter as much as it does getting the hardware from Commissioner Keith Gill. So I think that's always been their focus and the thing that they want to do. As we had talked about in a previous episode, with the NCAA ruling that the regular season NIT automatic bid no longer happens, it's all about doing enough to get to Pensacola and be the hot team then. And so I think that they really took that approach of preparing themselves, finding themselves in the non-conference slate. And now that they're in conference, they kind of get a feel of what they'll have to do to make it to the Monday game in Pensacola.
So I'm looking at the statistics for the Sun Belt, and let me give you the surprising statistic. It's not surprising because it kind of it's across the board for all conferences, but it always shocks me just a little bit how poorly basketball teams, college basketball teams in general, perform away from home. The Dukes are 6-1. The Dukes win no matter if they're at home or away. So congratulations to the Dukes. The only other team with a winning record on the road is your Marshalling Thundering Herd at 3-2. And then you got two teams at 3-3, and that's the Jags and the Eagles. Everybody else suffering away. Old Dominion, 0 wins away from their home court. A lot of teams with just 1 win. What do you make of that, guys? Is basketball just one of those sports where the home court advantage is just overwhelming?
It is. I mean, 4 of the top 5 teams in the AP poll have lost on the road to unranked teams in the past 2 days.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to win conference games on the road, and that's what we're getting into right now.
Not just conference games. I think any game.
Yeah.
I wonder, why do the Dukes have success at 6-1? I mean, that's a pretty good away record.
Yeah, I mean, they've played some bad teams on the road.
No, that
is.
Yeah.
But I mean, they've got some solid road wins. That Louisiana is a good one.
True.
Kent State's not looking maybe as great as it was, but Michigan State's a solid one. But I mean, they were fairly fortunate to win a couple of those early road games. And then they've beaten some teams that aren't that good, and they've got a solid road win or two. I mean, I think it's not a magic trick necessarily. I think we're just seeing that they're a decent team that's going to win maybe more than their share of road games, but they're gonna lose some too. And if they take care of business at home, they should be in pretty good shape when the final standings come around. But it's tough to win on the road.
I want to talk a little bit about that in a minute, but Dustin, I want to get your take on why it's so hard for college basketball teams to win on the road. It's the same. The courts have the same dimension. The hoops are the same circumference. It's all the same. What is the difference between playing at home and playing on the road?
I think there's several things. I think, in football, traditionally, when you're traveling, you're going to fly there. So it's a short, quick trip with ease. The non-revenue sports, as they like to say, the baseballs, the basketball, soccer, tennis, and everything, you're jumping in a van, a bus, a minibus, and driving the 5-7 hours to these games. It takes a toll on you. And also, I think every venue in the Sun Belt especially is so drastically different for how you shoot.
Okay.
I played one game ever in the Cajun Dome, and that was probably the hardest place I've ever had to shoot in my life, just because of the openness behind the baskets. It was completely different than anything of the traditional high school game of the cinder block, so to say, just feet behind the goal.
So is it about sight lines too? If you're trying to drill threes or make jumpers, is there something about having like you said, that openness in the Cajun Dome? Is there something about just having the consistency of home, having that environment being consistent? Does that stick with basketball players?
Subconsciously, I think so, because I mean, where are you shooting during the whole off season over the summer while you're working out? You're not traveling to Southern Miss to go shoot in their gym. You're not going to the Cajun Dome. You're sitting at home or whatever your home venue is, and that really helps you solidify where your spots are. I think immediately, even of like the Steph Curry, you know, how he's dribbling around and finding dead spots in the wood. That he knows that floor inside and out. There's no place like home, pure and simple.
Shane, I want to turn back to James Madison for just a moment, and with the loss at Southern Miss, knocks James Madison out of the top 25. I think they were, if you want to look at like the 26th or 7th team, and they're still getting votes. But with the schedule coming up, the Sun Belt schedule coming up, it's going to be very hard for James Madison to claw their way back. Or do you think, is there a avenue for James Madison to get back into the AP top 25?
I think there is. I think for one thing, I think the voters are being a little kinder to mid-majors this year.
Oh yeah, they have, especially in the Mountain West. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at last year. I was looking it up because I was kind of curious, like Charleston and FAU. It seemed like they were both ranked for a good chunk of last season. I looked it up. They were each ranked for 4 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And neither team got in until week 9, which is where we are right now. So JMU kind of like got an early bump, I think maybe because of some of those teams that made runs in the NCAA tournament last year. I think people like gave them the benefit of the doubt when they won early. And I think JMU, Grand Canyon, Princeton, all these Mountain West teams, all these teams are kind of like there on the radar right now. So I think if teams lose, I think these power conference teams maybe beat up on each other a little bit. Some teams lose, and those teams continue to have really good records. I think they can get back in to the top 25. I mean, it's going to take having a good record. They're going to have to be, like 20-2 or something. But I think it's possible they can get back in there because it wasn't until about this time last year that the pollsters really started like looking at teams like Charleston and saying, hey, they've got a really good record. I think that may be a top 25 type team.
And Southern Miss is going to have to do fairly well too, right? If somehow, James Madison manages to run the board from here on out, you still have to look at that Southern Miss game and go, well, it turns out they're a really good team too.
Yeah, or it has to look like, oh, that was just a one anomaly. Nobody's perfect, I think, teams can get the benefit of the doubt for a game or two with a bad loss. Bad losses happen in college basketball. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll definitely help if Southern Miss is like looking like, oh, Andre Curbelo actually made that a really good team and they can beat some teams. So, but we'll see. I think there's a chance they can get back in the top 25, but it's going to take winning. They're going to have to put together another, 7-8 game winning streak here and start to look really good again.
Well, who do the Dukes have tomorrow?
They have South Alabama.
All right. Well, you better beat South Alabama, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, JMU's got 4 home games in a row here.
Yeah.
That's the start. Is take care of business at home, and you might start getting those looks again.
Yeah, and that's kind of a wild scheduling thing, right? It does see these sort of 4-game blocks that teams are having. Arkansas State's in the middle of a 4-game block. They started with Georgia Southern and ODU. Next, they get Texas State and Louisiana in Jonesboro. I want to brag a little bit about my Red Wolves boys. Red Wolves set
shocker.
They set a points record. First time they had ever scored more than 100 points in what do you call it? In regulation time against Georgia Southern, 109 points, and they came back and shot a school record for 3-pointers made against ODU. Coach Brian Hodgson really has that team kind of finding themselves. And one of the reasons, Dusty, I asked your opinion on why teams are play so much better at home than on the road. Arkansas State just looks like a much different team at home. They hit the 3-pointers. They scramble for that extra rebound. They hit their free throws better. They just play better. So I'm really happy to be on this 4-game swing. Dusty, what do you think of these long home and away stretches?
It's great when you're at home. I mean, It obviously sucks when you're on the road, but Warhawks have 2 home games coming up. I wonder though, also, Jeremy, the Sun Belt has not really been a basketball conference,
not for a while. So
I don't think that there's really much attendance for it to be a hostile environment to the opposing team. You're lucky to even have your supporters there for the home team. Just a random thought that I threw out there for that.
You know what? I think some places I felt like Southern Miss had a pretty good crowd for JMU, which was understandable. Yeah. And at the time, it was when students hadn't been back, so students were still out on Christmas break. I did notice that, like for instance, Appalachian State doesn't get a whole lot of people at their games, but their venue is so small, it kind of feels that way. Yeah. I feel like maybe sometimes, I don't know. I've never been to the Warhawks place. Is it too big?
It's definitely too big.
Yeah, it was built up at a time when a lot of people were going to basketball games.
Yeah. Exactly, and also the Cajun Dome. Even if the Cajuns have a phenomenal crowd, I forget how big the venue is, but I've been there before for even the high school state championships, and it still feels empty.
Yeah, UA Little Rock did the right thing when they built their on-campus stadium, their arena, right there at UALR, the Jack Stevens Stadium. They made sure it was going to be intimate and smaller. Like they knew that the winds were changing, that people were watching more games on TV. They didn't want to make the same mistake that University of Arkansas made, which they made after their national title run. They knocked down their old arena and built one of these mega basketball arenas. It could fit like 20,000 people in it. And to fill that up, and they'll do it. They do it often. But it is a Herculean chore to fill that place up. And if they're having a bad season, it looks empty. So, yeah, I find that if you make your stadiums a little more intimate, a little more, a little tight-quartered, I feel like you can have that edge, Dusty. Shane, where do you think there are Sun Belt home advantages where there's rabid fans and sort of that atmosphere that intimidates the away team?
Well, I mean, how long are we going to keep calling them new schools as we're getting close to 2 years together? But the 4 new schools, they lead the league in attendance by a pretty good margin. And I mean, you do see the atmosphere at Southern Miss, at Marshall, at JMU, and at ODU. I mean, even ODU's struggling. Like we were talking about how bad they are before not winning a conference game yet. They're still leading the conference in attendance. And, they're getting 5,000 a night to watch a team that's struggling. And it's a good atmosphere there. JMU, it can be hit or miss a little bit because a lot of their fans come from 2 hours away. Saturdays might be close to sold out, and the weekday games might be 3,000. But yeah, so it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see what they're going to be like this week, coming home for the first time with students back and everything for the first time in a long time. I think the Saturday game could be a pretty good home atmosphere and an actual home court advantage for JMU this weekend.
See, at Arkansas State, we play in something called the First Bank Arena. I call it the Effin' Bank Arena, and it's an arena that's made for like concerts and tractor truck pulls and rodeos and volleyball games too and basketball games. It's just a big barn, so it's always like people get upset when it looks kind of empty. I'm like, guys, if we can get 3,000 people in here, that's great. That's good for us. It just doesn't look like 3,000 people. It looks like, I don't know, like 1,000 people because the size of the place. So I don't really think that's fair. I really think that for basketball, especially, if you could build an arena that holds 1,000 people, I think that's great. Do 1,500 roaring fans. I'll take that over an empty barn any day.
So there was actually, did you guys see this? There was an article in one of the national publications today. I don't know if it was CBS.com or something like that, about, Baylor opened up their new arena here in the last couple of weeks, and they downsized to about 7,000, coming off of a national championship not that long ago. They downsized to have just an incredible atmosphere in a smaller building. And basically the gist of the article was like, yeah, all but about 10 teams in the country ought to do this. Unless you're like Kansas or Kentucky, why are you playing in a gym with more than 15,000 people? But but that was the gist of the article. But it also kind of like gets to the point too that like you're saying, a lot of these buildings aren't just basketball arenas. A lot of these buildings serve as the only arena in their city, and it's there for concerts, it's there for graduation, it's there for WWE and anything else you can get to town. And so it's not always feasible, I guess, to like have a 2,000 seat basketball arena when your town needs to have a 9,000 seat arena just for everything else. But it would be cool if every college basketball game was sold out and ear piercing noise and just incredible atmosphere. But I don't know if we're going to get there.
Dusty, before we leave basketball, any team that's sort of jumping out at you that is either disappointing you or surprising you?
I mean, obviously the Warhawks are disappointment at 0-3, 4-9 overall. I'm really kind of surprised that Texas State is really kind of in the same boat as ULM. Yeah. That was the big thing. TJ is known as a recruiter. He came to Texas State as an assistant initially out of New Orleans as a big AAU coach. He had the ties, he had the contacts to land the talent. It just hasn't carried over to him taking over the program as the head coach. So definitely surprised with that. I think the Raging Cajuns at 1-2, little surprised that that's not a 2-1 record. I never count out Bob Marlin, though, that he's going to right the ship and make a late run there. Great to see Troy sitting atop the standings and Scott Cross at 3-0, 9-6 overall. Highly impressed with that team.
Yeah, and if I were Shane and JMU, I'd be a little nervous about South Alabama right now. I know that they're very inconsistent, but they're inconsistent one way or the other. They can either destroy you or they can look destroyed. So I'm not sure what JMU is going to see, but South Alabama always concerns me.
Well, in my preview article for that one, I did point out that the only team to beat JMU twice last year was South Alabama. So,
and last year they had that team of I don't know, what was it? A team of mercenaries that they got from all those different schools, and then they all left. But yes. So, Dusty, do we have any other news to talk about in the Sun Belt?
Women's basketball.
Yeah.
Where former show guest, Mr. Man Bun himself, Neil Harrow, leading the Dukes to a 3-0 conference start. Marshall also 3-0 on the women's side. Surprisingly, as we said earlier, the women's side, it's pretty close on parity. There's 2 0-3 teams of Southern Miss and South Alabama. For the most part, everybody has notched at least one win, with 3 teams having 2 having 3, and then, of course, the 2 perfect teams. Women's basketball, I think, is going to be a complete dogfight and a true battle to get the higher seeds.
Now, are you a little disappointed that ULM starting the season off 1-2? Because there is, I know, high hopes amongst many, but especially with you, Dusty. I think you're thinking that this could be a good year for the Warhawks.
I do, and I still believe that. Fell on the road to Georgia Southern, and it was a buzzer beater to get the win, and it couldn't have been a better perfect shot, and had to be reviewed several times to make sure the ball had actually left her hand and was in mid-flight as the backboard illuminated. it doesn't get any closer than that. And as the classic saying goes, shit happens. And that was a shit happens moment. And we roll on from there and get ready for the next games. All
right. Texas State also at 1-2. So it's not like you're in poor company. ULM's in poor company there when it comes to sort of a slow start in conference. A lot of season to go. I think Shane was the first to say it. There's nothing more competitive in the Sun Belt right now than women's basketball. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that shapes out.
One other thing, we do have the second round of the Sun Belt MAC Challenge coming up. Looking at the MAC standings, top 3 teams, 3-0, Akron, Toledo, Western Michigan. They have 2 0-3 teams of Ball State and Northern Illinois.
Ooh.
So even their preseason favorite is lost in the mix in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, because there's no way to predict the entropy that is college basketball. What else we got, Dust?
We're coming off a national title, so the 23 season is officially over. Did anybody catch the game? And also, leading into the game, I had a chance to go to the FWAA Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year honors reception for the head coach of Washington. Great guy to talk to. Did not know that this was only his 12th loss in his head coaching career, and he was an independent Major League Baseball player before deciding to hang up the cleats for the whistle.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. Nice. Hey, how was the I don't know, the festivities in Houston for that?
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
I tried to steer clear of downtown at all costs, but even living out in the burbs, it trickled out over here. There were lots of watch parties all over the place. Michigan definitely painted the town blue, and it was kind of cool to see, though.
Did you get into the stadium, or was it just the banquet circuit for you?
Yeah, I just went to the reception. It's Monday, so it's a school night. Got to go to bed early there, Shane. And then B, I didn't have a rooting interest in the game and could have cared less if either team won.
Well, I was going to have to ask you how Dylan Morris looked in warm-ups, since that's the quarterback of the near future for JMU.
Oh, yeah, he must be excited.
I saw the picture of C.J. Rogers, the transfer from Mississippi State, in his Washington jersey on the sidelines, just kind of sitting there like a bump on the log, a goon, whatever other word you want to use. Wasn't even really looking like he was taking in the moment of a national title. He was just kind of sitting on the bench, hanging out.
I did watch. I watched the first, I don't know, half hour of the game. And then something happened in the household where suddenly I was watching like Star Wars Return of the Jedi or something. I don't know how that happened. And then I ended up watching the last half of the game, which is actually kind of exciting. At first, it was nothing but touchdowns for Michigan, right? Just big
long runs.
So I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the world's worst game since the TCU game, right? And I had sort of a rooting interest, Dusty. I kind of want Washington to win because I really can't stand Michigan. I can't stand anything about them. So I was hoping that they would lose and that Washington would win. They kind of let me down at the end. Washington let me down at the end. But, at least it wasn't an SEC game, which I have grown tired of.
I thought when Washington scored right before the half, they had a chance, knowing they were getting the ball to start the second half. No mas.
Immediate turnover at the half. Yeah. So.
The other big news out of the national championship game was the lack of information about where EA Sports stands on getting the NCAA college football game up and going. Our former show guest, Matt Brown, was hammered on the X because he said before the game, I wouldn't look for any kind of advertisement or news or anything like that. And people were pissed that they stayed up for this game to watch it and not get a clip, a promo or anything.
Yeah, as a guy who's never been wild about the NCAA EA Sports game to begin with, I did not see what the big bub hub was about. But they looked like on social media there's some people who were pretty upset about that.
Yeah, there were. It was. I was surprised. I'm looking forward to the game, but I was surprised just how like crazy people went over the lack of. I don't know what they were expecting, a trailer or something, but it was rough out there.
Yeah, come on, just watch the game. See, now when you said something big was happening, I thought you were going to talk about certain retirement news that has seeped.
Oh, I don't care about that. The other big news that came out of the national championship game.
Okay.
The beloved strawberry Pop-Tart
Oh shit!
took America by storm.
Yeah,
When he sacrificed himself in the toaster to be eaten by K-State. The Pop-Tart Bowl will return in 2024.
thank God.
Because remember, there's 2 Pop-Tarts in every pack.
What an ingenious thing to do, though. You know, they really got into that. You know, to come up with that idea of toasting the Pop-Tart and then having the players eat it. You know, I think some of the smaller bowls would behoove themselves to think a little bit out of the box and come up with something like that. I don't know what it is. Don't ask me to think of what it is. But they would do good to hire maybe some sort of consulting firm and come up with some ideas for that.
Yeah, we need like Lockheed Martin to like let the players like shoot a bazooka or something. I don't know.
Yes. Now that's the kind of thinking that can get you sued, and that's why we shouldn't be the ones coming up with those ideas. But yeah.
And another news article there, Jeremy.
Okay.
Somebody came up with the bright idea. You know, there's Mr. Irrelevant in the NFL draft,
Oh,
the guy
God.
that's drafted dead last,
Yeah.
of coming up with the Irrelevant Bowl with the 2 worst D1 teams squaring off in a game. You're not too far removed from being in that category there, Jeremy. Would you want Arkansas State to be in the Irrelevant Bowl?
Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. You know, as a fan, and you should know this better than anybody, Dusty, when your team is just miserable all year long, the last thing you want to do as a fan, and probably if you're a player, the last thing you want to do as a player is extend that misery for the amusement of a bunch of glaring fans out there. They're only watching the game to see just more inept football. No, I am not a fan of that at all.
I have a little bit of a twist on it.
Oh, okay.
There's no way it could possibly be a postseason bowl game. Like, we just got to forget about that. But it should be a season opening, like week 0, like classic type of game. Because, I mean, that's something these people could get excited about. You get the opportunity. One of those teams is going to start the season on a good note by beating another FBS team in a game that people are going to be watching.
Yeah.
Even if it's just the sickos, like, people are going to watch it, people are going to talk about it, and one of those teams gets the opportunity to start fast and build something.
All right, I could get behind that, Shane. That's a good idea. You know, you'd have to work out the scheduling, of course, because some people already have scheduled games, and you'd find. But I'm sure, you know what? If we had a strong centralized office, you know, some sort of entity that can make decisions for all of college football. If only we had something like that, guys. Something like, I don't know, like the NCAA, maybe we could have gotten something like that done. But nah, I guess that's not going to happen.
I like the idea. It's extra practice. You suck. There's a reason you're in the bowl. You need the practice. Give me the extra month of practice.
Oh, I didn't think of it that way.
And also schedule this bowl. The national title was on Monday. The FCS championship was on Sunday. This game's on Saturday.
Yeah. You know what? It should be like the punishment bowl too. It should be like held like on an abandoned island in terrible conditions, just like maybe live alligators out on the sideline. Just make it to where it's almost like a Hunger Games type thing.
Or a stadium with veterinary clinics in its parking lot.
Oh, you're making fun. Okay.
You could play at halftime of the national championship game and be like, okay, you guys get 15 minutes. Like when they have the little youth game, like at halftime. Like,
yes.
You guys get 15 minutes here. Field's yours.
That would be great. Yes, I would totally watch like a UMass versus I don't know who else was terrible last year.
Arkansas State.
Why do you keep saying Dusty? I know.
He's deflecting.
He is. You're projecting. You're deflecting. It's fine, Dusty. I know your basketball team's sort of disappointing, and the Warhawks football isn't doing very well. But that's every year, Dusty. I don't know why you have to be angry tonight.
Because when I was in the Little Rock Airport not too long ago, they had no XX T-shirts for me becoming a T-shirt Arkansas State fan.
They had some shirts, though, right?
They had schmediums.
Yeah, okay. Hey, you could put one on.
Yeah, I could put it on. It would never come off.
Sexy.
On that note, plugs, promos, and parting shots. Shane, since you are on the mend, we throw you to the wolves first.
All right. I'll just say parting shot. We've hinted at it a little bit here, but everybody's talking about Nick Saban retiring.
Yes.
I do kind of wonder, though, what's all the hubbub about a guy who won 1/5 as many MAC titles as former Marshall coach Bob Pruitt?
If Alabama had any guts or balls, they'd hire Terry Bowden. That's my take on that. Just if they're really good, they can win with Terry Bowden.
Yeah. But I mean, just former Marshall coach Bob Pruitt won 5 times as many MAC titles as this Saban guy, and I don't remember the world stopping when he decided to retire.
Yeah, and did this guy you're talking about, who I can't remember now, you've said his name twice, has he ever lost to ULM? Because Saban has.
Yeah. I believe, I don't know, like Saban, what's Saban's record against Arkansas State? Because
at least 1-0. At least.
He's never beaten James Madison.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
I know he's got that loss to ULM. Like, I don't know.
He had his terrible.
This guy seems okay, but let's pump the brakes a little bit on all this.
Dusty, was it this year the Warhawks went to Alabama, or was it last year?
I don't know. They all blend together.
I was really hoping that, like a nervous as hell Saban would be on the sideline, kind of having a breakdown, thinking about, oh my God, I got to find a way to beat the Warhawks. But from what I recall, it was pretty much of a one-sided affair.
I just think it's funny that 17 years later, and we're still talking about that game.
Well, you gotta commemorate your victories, Dusty, and that's pretty much all you got.
I may have heard the App State Michigan game referenced in the past 24 hours as well. So,
oh God, you know what? I haven't. But did they do like a little? I didn't see the whole game. Did they do a film vignette of that?
I don't know, but
championship game. Okay, I probably would have blown up App Twitter if that had happened.
For my parting shot, yeah, I don't have one. 2 weeks in a row, and I'm unprepared. It's a great New Year's resolution, a great kickoff to the season. Check us out, funbeltpodcast.com. You can buy merch there to support the show, including our Get Irk in the Hall t-shirt, our Funbelt Podcast logoed t-shirt, the Feigning Goat, the infamous spelling.
Yeah, I saw one at the Camellia Bowl. So people are buying them.
The infamous Arkansas State Feigning Goat. It was a fantastic play that did not work.
It didn't work, and it's just sort of indicative of the entire Arkansas State experience.
That's all I have.
All right, I got a parting shot. It's actually a promo and a parting shot. Wrote an article today, a column for HalRazor.com, which is free to the public. Anybody can look it up. Talking about, I think the title of the article is every team's goals should be, every fan's goal should be insufferable. And I was talking a little bit about how, I think Michigan kind of triggered this because Michigan fans have been insufferable the last week or so, usually insufferable all the time. Isn't that kind of the goal, guys? Isn't in the end, don't we want to just be completely insufferable about our favorite teams? I mean, don't we want to be the guy that constantly mentions our teams when there's a discussion going on about great teams? Say, well, what about Arkansas State? They're pretty good. We can talk about them. Or we get mad when we're slighted, or we start lecturing other teams about how they need to work harder on their special teams. Don't we want that to be us? I mean, there's some criticism right now towards James Madison saying, oh, the fans are becoming insufferable. Don't we want that? Shouldn't we want that? Dusty, wouldn't you like to be part of a fan base that has become arrogant with winning? I would love that for Arkansas State. That is where we should be, right? So embrace
baby steps. You got to get there. You got to get there first, Jeremy.
Embrace the insufferability. Make that your goal, Dusty. Make that your goal for 2024. Become arrogant and insufferable. I beseech you. Do it now. Just for your mental health.
I'm done.